Hey guys, this is Ernesto and welcome back to yet another video. I hope you guys are having a fantastic day. I'm having a wonderful day. So today I wanted to do a quick tutorial on post-processing. And before we get into the post-production, I just wanted to tell you guys about how I prepare my environment before I get into actually doing the editing or the retouching of the image itself. So the very first thing that's important to me is making sure that I control the light within the environment. Now, I do edit on a laptop and not on my desktop. I really like editing on my laptop. So the one thing that I need to control within my environment is the light. So I have these windows in my office here, and one of the things that I try to do is make sure that the window shades are closed so that the light is not reflecting off of the computer and is not causing me to basically feel like the image is overexposed or underexposed or something like that. So that's the very first thing that I try to do, control the light. Now, by controlling the light, I also need to control the settings on my computer itself, my laptop, to make sure that it don't dim either up or down, so that would also distract me away from, or deceiving me, if you would, that the image is either brighter or darker than it needs to be. So making sure that my brightness on my monitor, which is the laptop monitor, is not too bright or not too dark, and making sure that it's not automatically dimming up or down. So I need to make sure that I take those settings off. So that's very important before I even start my post-production. So another thing that's very important for me is to making sure that I work with a correct tablet. Now, the tablet that I utilize is a very small one, and I think it's a pretty cheap one. I forgot how much I paid for it because I got it a while ago, but it's a Wacom, it's a Wacom bamboo tablet. And I'll put the model number on the screen here, and I'll put the information down in the description below. So you guys, if you wanted to pick it up, you could pick it up as well. But this tool is very, very important when it comes to retouching, because without this tool, you cannot really efficiently, easily, retouch an image. It's not impossible. You can obviously do it without this pad, but it would definitely be a lot more difficult. So I highly recommend that you get some type of tablet or some type of device that makes it a little bit easier for you. So as far as tools are concerned, the tablet and my laptop are the two things that I utilize to help me retouch an image. Now, I do also have a hard drive that I connect to my laptop, because basically I store all my images on that laptop. Now, I don't like to store things locally on my computer. I store it locally temporarily, and then I move it off to my hard drive, because, obviously if something happens with my computer, at least I have it backed up on that hard drive. So those are the things that I do. So let's jump into the retouching of this image. All right, guys, so this is the image that we're going to be retouching today. So this image is an image of Nicole. Now, this was a pinup shoot that I did maybe 2 years ago. I'll link up the video to that photo shoot in the information bar above, and I'll put a description to it below so you guys can view the full photo shoot that was done on this day. So this image was captured utilizing a reflector. The reflector was on camera left. Now, there was also a window here right next to the model that was helping to separate her from the background a little bit as well. Now, the one thing that's important about this image, as you could see, is that you have some nice little shadow details on the right side of the models, or left hand side of the model, which is camera right. So that's very, very important for me. I always like to get some depth and dimension in my images. But if you guys know about dodging and burning, that's essentially what I'm doing here. I'm creating some depth and dimension by dodging and burning with light to add that depth there. Okay, so the first thing, we are using Capture One, or I'm using Capture One. This is basically the tool that I like to use for my raw images. So I use this program to help with the processing. Now you could use Lightroom. I used to use Lightroom. Lightroom is very helpful. It's very quick for, you know, working with a large number of images. Like I utilize that program if I'm doing like an event, like such as a wedding, or, you know, if I'm covering some type of an event or something like that, I utilize Lightroom to do that. But when I'm working with portraits and stuff like that, this is what I utilize. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do in this image is basically I wanted to bring up the shadow information a little bit, because you could see from down here, you could already see what's going on with the chair here. So I want to add some detail back into this image. So let's do that really quickly. So we're going to bring that up in this panel here. We're going to add some shadows. Bring that up just a bit. Now you could begin to see some shadow information here, and then you can also see some shadow information in here, which is great. I don't want to push it too much, because if I push it, it might wash out the image a little bit. So also I want to also bring down the highlights just a little bit as well. Okay. Now there are these adjustment layers that you can actually apply just like you would in Lightroom, that you could apply to the image. So I'm going to adjust just this particular area a little bit more, because I don't want to wash out the rest of the image. So I want to bring up the shadow detail information here a little bit more. So I'm going to add an adjustment layer here, and we're just going to call this chair, just so we know what it is. And now you're just basically going to increase the shadows. Now this is not doing anything to the image right now. Okay, so I'm going to add a brush. Okay, and then I'm going to increase the brush size. And then I'm just going to brush here. Now this is where it's going to impact the image. What I did so far has no impact to the image. This adjustment layer is not doing anything to the image. So I'm just going to brush right now here on the chair. Now you could be a little bit loose with it, because right now there's nothing that you need to be careful about. The only thing I need to be careful about here is a little bit with our arm, because I don't want to brighten our arms more than I need to. Okay. But you can always bring that back if it's too ridiculous. Okay, so let me turn this on and off so you guys can see the impact. So this is off, and this is on, off, on. So you could see I added a lot more details there, and if you want to push it more, I can even push it more, but you don't want to make it too ridiculous. And what I also try to do, offset it a little bit by bringing down some of the highlights so it doesn't look too ridiculous. Okay. So this adjustment layer, all it's doing is impacting the chair, okay, and added some details into that chair. So let's go back to the overall image, okay. Let's make sure that the highlights, push the highlights a little bit more, because I'm looking at her skin here, and I just want to make sure that we have all that details in her skin, okay. And let's just push that just a little bit more, and I think I'm pretty happy with this. All right, so now let's move to adjusting the Kelvin a little bit on this particular image. So what I want to do here is I want to warm up this image a little bit. So let's try playing with some of the settings here. Now I generally don't play with this, but I want to warm up this image just a little bit. And you can always change this in post, as I am right now, so that's very important. So let's go with daylight. So I believe that's what it was. Let's put shade. All right, that's way too warm. I don't want it that warm, so I might just put it back to daylight. And then I'm just gonna pump up the Kelvin just a little bit here. And daylight, by the way, is how I shot this to begin with. I shot as daylight. So, okay, so now the image is warmed up just a little bit, which is perfect, because that's exactly what I want. Now, if you ever wanted to do like a before and after in Capture One, you could click on this, hold down on your Alt key, and then click on the undo button. And that's how you could do the before and after, okay? All right, so there's just one other thing that I would like to do in this image, and that is sharpen the image just a little bit. So in Capture One, they have under the clarity section. Now clarity works a little bit differently in Capture One than it does in Lightroom. It's much better in Capture One than it is in Lightroom. So I'm gonna bump up the clarity just a little bit, And then I'm gonna bump up the structure on this image just a little bit, okay? And guys, just so you know, I haven't retouched this image before. This is the first time I'm retouching this image. This image actually wasn't retouched 2 years ago. I'm just retouching it now just to show as an example to you guys, okay? So I really have no idea how this image is gonna unfold, but you will see as we go along, okay? All right, so I think that's about it. Now, the one other thing that I noticed before we get out of Lightroom, because I think that's all the stuff that I want to do in this image. The other thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to brighten up her eyes, because I feel like the eyes are getting lost a little bit. So it doesn't seem to have a little bit of punch. So let's zoom into her eyes a little bit here. And we're going to use the adjustment layer again, and we're going to bump up the shadows just a little bit. Let me reduce the brush size on this, and we're going to brush in her eyes. Okay, we don't want to go too ridiculous with the shadows because it's going to just make her eyes look weird. Okay, so let's zoom out just to check it out to see what difference that made. So this is before and this is after. So it's just a little bit of change, not that much. Okay, so I think that's all we're gonna do in Capture One. So just to recap the items that I basically adjusted within Capture One, and then from there we're gonna go into Photoshop. So in Capture One, I adjusted the Kelvin settings on this image, so just to make it a little bit warmer, okay? Then I basically adjusted the overall shadow and highlights in this image. I also adjusted the clarity and the structure to make this image a little bit sharper, okay? Then I basically added a whole bunch of adjustment layers, well, not a whole bunch, just 2 adjustment layers to this image, which is one is for the chair, just to basically bring up the shadow details on the chair a little bit. And then I adjusted her eyes because it just felt like her eyes needed a little bit more life to it. It felt just a little bit lost to me. Okay, so now to get this thing into Photoshop, there's these things that they call process recipes. Now, these are the defaults that came with Capture One. So I haven't changed these recipes. I haven't added my own. These are just defaults that came with it. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna push this into Photoshop. Now you can use TIFF or PSD. I generally work in the PSD, but I think TIFF is better. So let's output this into Photoshop.